The phone call came at midnight. John had been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind heavy with the weight of 7 years without her. He'd spent countless nights replaying the moment she disappeared, trying to understand what had happened. His fiancée, Emily. The woman he had promised to spend the rest of his life with, had vanished without a trace. No warning. No goodbye. One day, she was simply gone. The police had searched, but there were no clues. Her car was found abandoned by the side of the road, the windows rolled down, the keys still in the ignition. Her phone was never recovered. Her friends and family had all been questioned, but no one had any answers. It was like she had vanished into thin air. He had been devastated. Not just because she was gone, but because there was no closure. No understanding of why or how or what had happened to her. The grief had become a permanent fixture in his life, a dull ache that never quite faded. He had tried to move on, to live, but every attempt felt hollow. She was the love of his life, and without her, he was lost. And yet, that night, at exactly 12:03 a.m., his phone rang. John groggily rolled over, squinting at the screen. It was an unknown number. His heart skipped. He didn't even know why he picked it up. Maybe it was the hope, that deep-seated desire to hear her voice again. Maybe he was foolish enough to think that somehow, after all these years, this could be real. That maybe, just maybe, this was her. "Hello?" he said, his voice rough from sleep. There was a pause on the other end of the line. A long, agonizing pause. Then, a voice he would know anywhere, though it sounded different, strained, spoke. It was shaky, as if the person on the other side of the line had been crying, or was scared out of their mind. "John?" the voice asked, trembling. It's Emily." His heart froze. He couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't move. His hand clenched the phone so hard his knuckles whitened. "Emily," he whispered, barely able to say her name. The voice on the other end sighed, but it wasn't a sigh of relief. It was filled with fear, desperation. "I know this sounds crazy, but, please, you have to believe me. I'm real. It's really me." John's mind raced. Was this a joke? A prank? Someone had to be messing with him, right? But how? Why? Why now? He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. His throat was dry, his heart pounding. He could barely believe what he was hearing. "John," Emily continued, her voice trembling even more. "I need you. I need you to come to me. Now. Please. I'll explain everything, but I can't talk much longer. They're coming." John's pulse quickened. "Who's coming? What's happening? Where are you?" The line went silent. Then, the voice returned, softer now, almost as if she were afraid someone might hear her. "I don't have time. You have to trust me, John. Just get here as fast as you can. I'm in danger. Please, I'm begging you." Before he could respond, the call cut off, leaving nothing but the dial tone in his ear. John sat there for a moment, staring at his phone. The words that had just been spoken echoed in his mind, each one drilling deeper into his chest. Emily. She was alive. She wasn't dead. And she needed him. But how was that possible? 7 years. 7 years had passed since anyone had seen or heard from her. How could she just be alive? And why hadn't she contacted him sooner? His thoughts were swirling, his heart racing, and his body screamed for action. He had to go. He didn't know where she was, but it didn't matter. All he knew was that he couldn't wait. He couldn't sit there wondering what was going on. He had to find her. He grabbed his jacket off the chair, pulled it on hastily, and rushed out the door. It was a chilly night, but the cold didn't even register as he drove. His mind was a whirlwind, his thoughts bouncing from one question to another. Where was she? Why was she in danger? Who was after her? But none of that mattered right now. The only thing that mattered was that Emily, his Emily, was alive. She was waiting for him. He sped down the empty streets, not caring about the speed limits, his eyes glued to the road. As he drove, the weight of the years seemed to lift. For the first time in so long, there was hope in his chest. Hope that he would finally get the answers he so desperately needed. Hope that he could hold her again. The directions she had given him were vague, just a simple address, a small cabin on the outskirts of town. It wasn't far, but it felt like a lifetime away. The longer the drive, the more questions surfaced. How could she be alive? What had happened to her? Why hadn't she come home sooner? As the car bounced over the rough dirt road leading up to the cabin, John's heart began to race again. He couldn't explain it, but something about the place felt wrong. The woods were dark and silent, and the cabin in the distance looked abandoned, dilapidated even. There was no sign of life. No lights, no movement. It seemed like no one had been there in years. He pulled up to the cabin, his headlights illuminating the structure. The door was ajar, swinging slightly in the breeze. John's stomach clenched with unease. He stepped out of the car, his feet crunching on the gravel beneath him. He scanned the area, expecting to see Emily running toward him, her face filled with relief and joy. But there was nothing. A sudden rustle from the side of the cabin caught his attention. He whirled around, his heart pounding. At first, all he saw were shadows, shifting, eerie shadows that danced in the dim light. But then, out of the darkness, two small figures emerged. Children. Twins. A boy and a girl. They were no older than 6 or 7, their faces pale with fear. They were standing just outside the cabin, staring at him. John froze, his breath catching in his throat. The sight of them was unexpected, out of place. Why were they here? And why were they waiting by the cabin in the middle of nowhere? One of the children stepped forward, clutching the hand of the other. The girl, with wide, frightened eyes, looked up at him and spoke in a small, trembling voice. "Mom told us to wait for you. But she's not here." John's heart skipped a beat. Mom? His mind raced. This was impossible. Emily hadn't mentioned anything about children. And yet, these two were standing in front of him, clearly waiting for someone, and according to the girl, they were waiting for him. The boy clutched the girl's arm tightly, as though afraid to let go. His face was full of confusion, his eyes darting from John to the cabin, back to John again. What do you mean?" John asked, his voice trembling with uncertainty. "Where is your mom?" The girl's lips quivered. She's inside. She told us to wait. But she's been gone a long time." John's breath caught in his chest. He took a step toward the children, the weight of the situation sinking in. These children, these twins, were here for him, and they were somehow connected to Emily. Just then, the silence was broken by a soft sound, like a door creaking open. John whipped around, his pulse racing. Out of the shadows, Emily emerged, her figure barely visible at first, but then clearer as she stepped into the light. His breath caught in his throat. It was her, no doubt about it. The same face, the same eyes, the same features. But she looked different. Thin. Tired. Worn. Like the years had taken their toll on her. And then, in her arms, something John hadn't expected. Twins. His heart hammered in his chest as he stared at Emily, his mind spinning. His thoughts tumbled over each other in a dizzying rush. She was alive. She was here. But the questions kept coming. Why had she disappeared? Why hadn't she returned sooner? And most importantly, why were the twins here? John's mouth went dry as Emily walked toward him. But before she could speak, another voice, cold and menacing, echoed from behind the cabin. They found us. You shouldn't have come. The words echoed in John's mind. They found us. His eyes locked on Emily, who was standing just a few feet away, her hands tightly clutching the twins. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, as if the very air around her was thick with danger. The voice that had spoken, cold and cruel, came from behind the cabin. John's first instinct was to turn and look, but he didn't want to leave Emily's side. Not now. Not after all these years. Emily? His voice broke, almost a whisper. Who's coming? Who found you? Her eyes flickered toward the cabin, then back to him, but she didn't say anything at first. Instead, she took a deep breath, steadying herself as if gathering strength from deep within. You shouldn't have come, John, she said, her voice strained, almost pleading. I never wanted you to be part of this. You're in danger now, and so are the kids. John's mind raced. He couldn't understand. What had happened to her? Why had she disappeared? And who were these people? The twins, still standing silently, watched the exchange between the two adults with wide, innocent eyes. They didn't seem to understand the depth of the situation, but their fear was palpable, hanging in the air like a heavy fog. Emily, I don't understand, John said, stepping closer to her. His heart was pounding in his chest. He needed answers, he needed to know the truth. You just disappeared. We all thought you were gone. Everyone thought you were dead. I know. Emily's voice cracked, and for the briefest moment, John saw the vulnerability in her eyes, something he hadn't seen since the night she vanished. I was. But not the way they think. The weight of her words hit John like a tidal wave, almost knocking the air out of him. She was dead? But then how was she standing here, talking to him, holding his children? He opened his mouth to ask more questions, but Emily shook her head, cutting him off. Not here, John. Not now. Please. I'm begging you. A rustling sound came from behind the cabin again, this time louder, more insistent. It wasn't the wind or animals, this was something different. Something human. Something threatening. Emily's eyes darted to the cabin. Her fingers tightened around the twins, her expression shifting from fear to desperation. We don't have much time. You have to listen to me. I'll explain everything, but we need to move. John's heart was still racing. The questions burned in his chest, but now he realized that Emily was right. They were in danger. His life had been on pause for so long, but now that he'd found her, found the truth, he couldn't let anything happen to her. To them. Without another word, Emily turned toward the cabin. John, his mind still reeling, followed her quickly, trying to keep his eyes on the twins, who had already started moving ahead. They were silent, walking hand in hand, like two little soldiers following their mother into the unknown. The cabin was old and run down, the kind of place that looked as though it had been abandoned for years. Yet, there was something off about it. Despite its dilapidated state, the area around it was unnaturally quiet. The air itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As they reached the door, Emily stopped. She turned around slowly to face John. Her eyes, wide with fear, met his gaze. Please, she whispered. You have to trust me. I didn't want this life. I never wanted to be a part of it. But I had no choice. No one gave me a choice. John was standing at the door now, his hand resting lightly on the weathered frame. What are you talking about, Emily? What happened to you? Why did you leave? Why didn't you tell me? Emily looked down, her breath shaky. I had to disappear. They were watching me. They were always watching. The people who took me, they didn't just take me, John. They took everything from me. John was about to speak, but just then, the door behind Emily creaked open. She froze. A figure stepped into the dim light, a shadowy silhouette that made the hair on the back of John's neck stand up. He couldn't see their face, but he could feel the weight of their presence, cold and dangerous. Emily. The voice was low and gravelly, the words filled with menace. Emily's face turned white, her entire body tensing. No. Please. Not now. Not again. John felt his stomach drop. Who was this? This wasn't just anyone, this was someone who held power over her, someone who had put the fear of God into her. And that made John's blood run cold. The figure stepped closer, revealing a tall man in a dark trench coat. His face was obscured by the shadows, but there was something about him that made John's skin crawl. His eyes gleamed in the dark, cold and calculating. You should have stayed away, Emily, the man said, his voice dripping with authority. You should have never come back. John's fists clenched, his heart hammering. He wanted to step forward, to confront the man, but a part of him knew better. This man was dangerous, and in that moment, John realized just how far out of his depth he really was. Emily took a step back, her hands shaking. The twins, still holding hands, were standing behind her, their faces filled with confusion and fear. Please, Emily begged, her voice barely above a whisper. I just wanted to be with them. I just wanted to be free. The man in the trench coat stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. Freedom is a luxury you no longer have, Emily. You're far too valuable. The moment you left, we knew you'd come back. And now, we have to deal with the consequences. John's mind was racing. He was struggling to understand what was happening. Who was this man? What did he mean by valuable? And what had Emily been involved in all these years? But before he could ask another question, the man's eyes shifted past Emily, locking onto him. And who is this? He sneered. The Good Samaritan who thinks he can save her? John's pulse quickened, his instinct screaming at him to back away. But he refused to be intimidated. He had come this far to find Emily, and he wasn't going to back down now. I'm the one who's going to get her out of here, John said, his voice low and steady. And I'm not leaving without her. The man chuckled darkly. You really think you can save her, don't you? You have no idea what you're dealing with. This isn't just about her, John. It's about something much bigger. Something you can't even begin to understand. Emily took a deep breath, then turned to face John. There was a look in her eyes, something that John couldn't quite place. Was it fear? Regret? Or maybe it was something more, something she wasn't telling him. We don't have much time, she said, her voice now filled with urgency. They're going to come for us. They've been watching us for years. And they'll stop at nothing to get what they want. John's mind spun. He didn't know what was happening, but one thing was clear, they weren't just after Emily. They were after all of them. The man in the trench coat took another step forward, closing the distance between them. His voice was low, threatening. I suggest you leave now, John. Before things get much worse. Emily's eyes locked onto John's with an intensity he had never seen before. John, you have to go. You can't help me. This is bigger than you. But it was too late. Before he could say another word, the sound of car engines roared in the distance, the unmistakable hum of approaching vehicles. Emily's face paled, and she grabbed the twins' hands. We have to go. Now. John didn't move. He couldn't. He knew, deep in his gut, that they were running out of time. And he couldn't let her face whatever was coming next alone. But it seemed that the man in the trench coat had other plans. With a single, menacing glance, he turned and stepped into the shadows. "Run," Emily whispered urgently. "Run, John. Run now." The chase had already begun. And they were only just getting started. John's mind was a whirlwind of questions, confusion, and fear. He stood frozen in place, staring at Emily as she pulled the twins toward the darkened woods. The man in the trench coat had disappeared into the shadows, but John could still feel the weight of his cold, calculating gaze. "What the hell is going on?" John muttered under his breath. "Who are these people? Why are they after you, Emily?" Emily didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced nervously around the cabin, as if expecting something, or someone, to appear from the trees at any moment. Her face was pale, her breath shallow, and the look in her eyes was one John hadn't seen before, a mixture of fear, regret, and something darker. The twins, holding each other's hands tightly, walked ahead with purpose. Despite the fear radiating off them, there was an eerie calmness in their movements. They seemed to know where they were going, their small feet moving swiftly through the underbrush as if they had done this before. "Emily!" John called after her, his voice rising with urgency. "What the hell is happening? Who were those people?" Emily stopped walking and turned slowly, her face drawn with a deep sorrow that John hadn't seen in years. He wanted to reach out to her, to pull her into his arms, to comfort her, but something in her eyes stopped him. They're part of a group I got involved with," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "A dangerous group. I didn't know what I was getting into at first. But by the time I realized what was happening, it was too late." John felt his stomach tighten. "A group? What kind of group?" Emily's eyes flickered to the twins, then back to him. "They're people who deal in things that shouldn't exist. They specialize in research. Research that no one should ever be involved in. And I was too close to it." John felt a chill wash over him. Research? What kind of research could be so dangerous? And what could Emily, of all people, have gotten herself mixed up in? "Are you talking about experiments?" he asked hesitantly. Emily nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to the ground. "Yes. But not just any experiments. These people, they were using children, John. My children." The words hit John like a punch to the gut. Her children. The twins, who were standing only a few feet away, now watching their mother with wide, innocent eyes, had been part of whatever nightmare Emily had been living through. They weren't just the children she had run back to, they were the product of something much darker. "Your children," John's voice caught in his throat. How could they?" "I didn't know," Emily whispered, her face contorted in guilt. "I didn't know what was happening at first. They kept me in the dark. I didn't realize what they were using me for until it was too late. And by then, the twins, by the time I figured it out, well, they were already involved. I couldn't get them out of it. Not alone." John's mind raced. The confusion, the betrayal, the overwhelming sense of helplessness was starting to settle in his chest. "So you ran? You disappeared to keep them safe?" Emily's gaze was distant, her expression a mixture of regret and pain. "I ran, yes. I thought I was doing the right thing. But I had no idea how deep it all went. I didn't realize that the people who were behind this wouldn't stop. They'd keep coming for me, for the twins. For what we knew. For what we were involved in." John could hardly keep up with the revelations. But one thing was clear, Emily was running from something monstrous, something far worse than he could have ever imagined. And now, he was caught in the middle of it. "The twins," John said, his voice rising in horror. They're part of this? What kind of research are we talking about?" Emily looked at him, her eyes filled with a sorrow that broke his heart. "I don't know all the details, John. I really don't. But whatever they did, it was monstrous. It wasn't just about science. It wasn't just about testing. It was about control. They were trying to control something. Someone. And they used us to do it." John took a step back, trying to process everything. "Control what? What do you mean?" The rustling of leaves interrupted their conversation, and Emily's head snapped to the side. She grabbed the twins' hands and pulled them close to her. John's instinct screamed that they weren't alone. Before he could say anything, a dark figure stepped out from behind a nearby tree, his face obscured by the shadow of his hood. He was tall, lean, and moved with purpose. The moment he appeared, the tension in the air escalated. John could feel his heart beating faster, the sense of danger tightening around them. "Emily," the man said. His voice cold and authoritative. "You know we can't let this go any further." John instinctively moved in front of Emily and the twins, his body acting before his brain could catch up. The man's cold gaze flicked over to him, and a cruel smile tugged at his lips. "Who is this?" the man asked, his eyes narrowing. "Another savior? Another hero?" John gritted his teeth, trying to stay calm. "What do you want from us?" he demanded. The man took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving John. "What we want from you, John, is your compliance. We want Emily to come back with us. We want the twins back where they belong. And we want all of this," he motioned to the forest around them, "to go away." Emily stepped forward then, her face a mask of defiance. "I'm not going back to you. Not now. Not ever. And I won't let you take my children." The man's smile faded, replaced by a look of pure coldness. "You think you have a choice in this? You think you can just walk away, after all that's happened? You have no idea what you're up against, Emily." John could feel the tension crackling in the air. The man's presence was oppressive, his words chilling. Whoever he wasn't someone to be trifled with. "Tell me what you want," John said, his voice steady but laced with anger. "If it's Emily you want, then leave us alone. We'll go. Just let the kids go." The man chuckled, the sound low and unsettling. "You still don't get it, do you? The children are the key. Emily is just a part of the equation. But those twins? They're the ones we need. They're the ones who hold the answers." Emily's hand tightened on the twins' shoulders, her face pale but resolute. "You'll never have them." The man sighed, clearly losing patience. "We'll see about that." His eyes flickered toward the woods again, and suddenly, John heard the unmistakable sound of more footsteps, more figures moving toward them from the shadows. Without warning, the man raised his hand, and the air around them seemed to grow even heavier. A cold wind whipped through the trees, snapping branches and sending leaves scattering into the air. "They're coming," Emily whispered, more to herself than to John. "You need to go. You need to take them and run." But John wasn't about to leave her. Not now. Not after everything they had been through. "I'm not leaving without you," he said firmly. "Whatever this is, whatever you're involved in, we're in it together now. You and the kids. I'll protect you." The man chuckled again, dark amusement in his eyes. "How touching. But you won't get far." Just then, the first of the shadowy figures emerged from the woods, their forms cloaked and their faces obscured by hoods. There were at least 5 of them, all moving with the same terrifying precision. John's heart raced as he turned back to Emily. "We need to go. Now." The twins, still holding hands, tugged on Emily's sleeve. "Mom," the boy said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do we do?" Emily looked at her children, her heart breaking. "Run. Run as fast as you can. Don't look back. I'll catch up. But deep down, John knew she wouldn't be able to. Not unless they fought back. And from the look of things, the people coming for them weren't going to give up without a fight. The chase was about to begin. And the danger was just getting started. The shadows closing in around them felt suffocating. John's heart was pounding in his chest as the hooded figures emerged from the dark woods like ghosts, their presence eerie and unsettling. He could feel the coldness in the air, the oppressive weight of something much larger and darker than he could comprehend. Emily was at his side, her face tense, her hand gripping the twins' shoulders as they huddled together. "We need to go," John muttered, his voice low, yet filled with urgency. He could hear his own breath, ragged and uneven. The adrenaline coursing through his veins made everything feel more intense, more real. They didn't have much time. "Emily, we need to run." But Emily didn't move. She didn't flinch. Her gaze remained fixed on the approaching figures, her body tense, but there was no panic in her eyes. If anything, it was the opposite, a calm, controlled focus that sent a chill through John's spine. "They're not going to let us go," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Running won't help. Not anymore." John turned to her, his confusion mounting. "What do you mean?" "We have to try." But Emily shook her head. Her voice was tight with frustration, but there was a sadness in it too, a sadness that spoke of years of struggle, of pain and regret. "They've been after me for too long. This is bigger than all of us, John. We can't outrun it. We can't hide from it. The only way to get out of this is to face it." John's stomach turned. The thought of facing these people, these shadows from Emily's past, filled him with dread. He wasn't ready. None of them were. But deep down, he understood that Emily was right. They had no choice. "They've been tracking us for years, John. I've been running from them ever since I left that life behind," Emily continued. "But I couldn't keep running forever. They've found us now." John's mind raced. He needed to understand, needed to know everything, everything Emily had been through. But there was no time for that now. The figures were moving closer, their silhouettes dark and menacing. They weren't waiting. They weren't hesitating. They were closing in. The twins, still standing next to Emily, looked up at her with eyes full of confusion and fear. "Mom, what's going to happen?" the boy asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Emily knelt down in front of them, her hands gently brushing through their hair. There was love in her touch, but it was laced with sorrow. She looked into their eyes, and for a brief moment, John could see the woman she used to be. The woman who had loved him, the woman who had been carefree and full of hope. "I'm sorry, my loves," she said, her voice shaking. "I never wanted you to be part of this. But now we have to face it. Together." John felt a lump form in his throat. He couldn't imagine the kind of burden Emily had been carrying for all these years. She hadn't just been hiding from the people who took her, she had been hiding from the very truth of what had happened. And now, it was all coming to light. The hooded figures were almost upon them now. The lead figure, the man from earlier in the trench coat, stepped forward. His face was still hidden by the shadows, but John could see the coldness in his eyes. The cruelty. The power that radiated from him. "You really think you can escape, Emily?" the man asked, his voice smooth, yet tinged with contempt. "You think you can just walk away from all of this?" Emily stood up slowly, her body stiff with determination. "I've been running for years. And I'm done. You won't have my children. You won't have any of us." The man's lips curled into a cruel smile. "You really think you have any control here? You have no idea what you're up against. You and your children are just pieces on a board. And now, it's time to finish the game." Emily's expression hardened, but there was a flicker of fear in her eyes, an emotion John hadn't seen since the night she disappeared. But she hid it quickly, masking it with a cold, fierce resolve. The twins, sensing the tension in the air, moved closer to their mother. They didn't speak. They didn't ask questions. They simply stood there, quietly, as though they knew something was about to happen. Something that would change everything. "Tell me what you want," John said, his voice rising. He took a step forward, placing himself between Emily and the man in the trench coat. "If it's Emily you want, take her. Leave the kids out of it." The man's gaze flickered to John, and for a moment, there was something calculating in his eyes. Then, with a soft laugh, he shook his head. "It's not about what we want, John. It's about what we need. And right now, we need you all." John's pulse quickened. His confusion was growing, but one thing was certain: these people weren't just after Emily. They were after all of them. The twins. Himself. Everyone. The man in the trench coat took another step forward, the air around them growing heavier with each movement. "You still don't understand, do you? Emily didn't just disappear. She was part of something much bigger. Something that's been watching you all for a long time." John felt his blood run cold. "What are you talking about?" The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Only a predatory, chilling coldness. "You're all part of this, John. You always have been. You just didn't know it." Emily's eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth. "No. Don't." But it was too late. The man's words were out there, hanging in the air like a death sentence. "Your children are not just ordinary children, Emily," the man said, his voice now low and dangerous. "They're the result of something extraordinary. Something we've been working on for years. And now, we need them. We need what they hold." John's heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about? What do they hold?" The man glanced at the twins. "The children, they're special. They were made for a purpose. A purpose you didn't understand. And now, they are the key to something much bigger than you." John felt like the ground beneath him was slipping away. "What do you mean, maid? You're saying?" Emily stepped forward suddenly, her voice fierce and protective. "Don't listen to him, John. They're trying to manipulate you. They want you to believe things that aren't true." But the man continued, his voice unwavering. "It's not manipulation, Emily. It's the truth. Your children were the product of a project. A project designed to push the boundaries of human biology. They are enhanced. They have abilities. And now, we need them to complete what we started." John's mind was spinning. Enhanced? Abilities? What kind of sick, twisted research had Emily been caught up in? What had they done to her, and to the twins? "You're lying," John said, his voice thick with disbelief. "You're trying to twist the truth. You think I'll just believe anything you say?" The man's expression darkened. "Believe what you want, John. But the truth is clear. Your children are a part of something far bigger than any of us. They were created for a purpose, and now that purpose is about to be realized." The air around them seemed to crackle with tension, the sound of distant thunder rolling in the background. Emily stood firm, her face a mask of determination, but John could see the pain behind her eyes, the weight of the years she had spent running, hiding, trying to protect the children she loved so fiercely. But now, she couldn't protect them anymore. None of them could. The man in the trench coat took another step forward, his eyes fixed on the twins. "You've had your chance to run, Emily. And now, it's time for the children to fulfill their destiny." Emily's grip on the twins tightened, her voice filled with resolve. "You'll never have them. Never." But the man was unshaken. "We'll see." Before John could react, there was a sharp, cold snap in the air, like the sudden crack of thunder, but there was no storm. The ground beneath them trembled, and the trees shook. John's heart skipped a beat. And then, from the darkness of the woods, more figures emerged. There were at least a dozen of them now, dark, imposing, and armed. This wasn't just a group of people anymore. This was an organized force. And they were coming for them. "Emily," John whispered, his voice barely audible. "What have we gotten into?" But Emily didn't answer. She was already moving, her body rigid with purpose, her hand clutching her children's tightly. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. And no matter what it took, she would protect them. She had to. The world around them seemed to freeze, the tension so thick it felt like it could be cut with a knife. John's mind raced, trying to process the madness unfolding before his eyes. The figures surrounding them weren't just ordinary men and women. These were people who had come prepared, people who had been hunting Emily, and her children, for far too long. The man in the trench coat, who had led them to this moment, stepped forward, his gaze never wavering from Emily. His words were slow, deliberate, as if savoring the power he wielded in this moment. "You've been running for a long time, Emily," the man said, his voice chilling. "But there's no more running now. No more hiding. You've made it this far, but this is where it ends." John's muscles tensed, every instinct in his body screaming for him to act. He couldn't let this happen. He couldn't just stand by and watch these people take Emily, and the twins, away from him. But even as his thoughts raced, he could see the grim determination in Emily's eyes, a determination that terrified him as much as it reassured him. She wasn't going down without a fight. "Stop." John's voice was filled with urgency, but it wasn't just for Emily. It was for the twins, who were standing beside her, their small hands clenched in fear. "You won't take them. Not now. Not ever." The man didn't flinch. He didn't even look at John. His attention remained fixed on Emily, and his next words were laced with venom. "You still don't understand, do you? You think this is about you? This is about what you gave birth to, Emily. Your children. They are the key to everything." Emily's face paled, but she didn't back down. "You're not taking my children. Not now. Not ever. I'd die before I let you." John stood next to her, unsure of what to do next. His mind was still reeling from the revelation that the twins weren't just ordinary children. They were special, enhanced in ways that John couldn't yet fully comprehend. They were the product of experiments that Emily had been a part of. But how? Why? The man in the trench coat didn't seem to care about the emotions in the air. He didn't care about Emily's defiance or John's plea. His words were cold and calculated, a perfect reflection of the ice in his veins. "You think you can stop this?" the man asked, his voice lowering, becoming almost a whisper. "You're just a mother trying to protect her children. But you're too late. They are ours now." A chill swept through the clearing, and John's gaze flicked from the man to the children. The twins, who had been so silent and so still, were looking up at Emily now, their faces filled with confusion and fear. The boy reached for his mother's hand. "Mom, what's happening?" His voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried with it the weight of everything that had been said in the past few minutes. Emily's expression softened for a brief moment, but only briefly. She squeezed his hand tightly, as though reassuring him that everything would be all right. "It's okay, sweetie," she said, her voice steady despite the danger surrounding them. "You need to listen to me. No matter what happens, you have to stay strong. You have to stay together. We're going to get through this." John watched her, his heart breaking at the sight of the twins, their innocent eyes filled with confusion. They had no idea what was really happening, no idea of the horrible truths that had been kept from them. All they knew was that their world was falling apart. But before Emily could say anything more, the sound of footsteps breaking the silence made everyone freeze. From the shadows, more figures emerged, like phantoms stepping out from the darkened woods. These weren't just regular men, these were people who exuded power and control. There was an eerie uniformity to their movements, a precision that spoke of years of training, years of planning. These people had been prepared for this moment. For this confrontation. John's eyes darted around, assessing the situation. There were at least 20 of them now. At least 5 of them were heavily armed, holding weapons with professional ease. But it wasn't the weapons that scared John, it was the fact that these people weren't just random mercenaries. These were organizers, people who had been following Emily's every move for years. They were here for a purpose, and that purpose was clear now: they were here for the twins. The leader, the man in the trench coat, stepped forward once again, his voice calm and almost patronizing. "You're still fighting, Emily. But it's over. The children belong to us now. There's nothing you can do to stop it." Emily's grip tightened on the twins' hands, and she glanced at John, her eyes filled with determination, and something else. Desperation. "We're not letting them go," John said, stepping forward, his chest tight with anger. "Not while I'm here." The man in the trench coat didn't even blink. "You think you can stop us, John? You think you can protect them?" "I will protect them," John replied, his voice unwavering. "I don't care who you are. I won't let you take them." The tension in the air was suffocating. Emily's hand brushed over her side, as if instinctively reaching for something. John noticed her fingers brushing against a small pouch tied to her waist, a pouch he hadn't seen before. "Emily," John's voice was low, but he couldn't help himself. His curiosity gnawed at him. What was she holding? What did she have that could help them? Emily turned to face him briefly, her gaze dark and fierce. "Trust me, John," she said in a voice that held a promise. "There's a reason I've been running all these years. There's a reason I haven't told you everything. I didn't want you to get involved in this. But now you are. And now we need to end it." Before John could react, Emily's hand flew to the pouch at her waist. In one swift motion, she pulled something out, a small, sleek device that looked like a compact transmitter of some kind. She pressed a button on the side, and instantly, the air seemed to hum with a strange energy. "What the hell is that?" John asked, his eyes narrowing in confusion. The man in the trench coat sneered. "You think that will save you?" But Emily didn't answer. She didn't need to. The device in her hand began to glow with a faint blue light, and the world around them seemed to shift, the air thickening, vibrating with an intensity that John had never felt before. The children, the twins, looked up at Emily, their eyes wide with fear but also something else, something that mirrored the intensity of the moment. They weren't just passive bystanders in this story. They were part of it. They were part of something much larger, much more dangerous than any of them could have ever imagined. And as Emily pressed the button one final time, everything around them changed. A loud crack echoed through the air, followed by a strange, otherworldly hum. The ground shook beneath their feet, and John felt a sharp, tingling sensation in the air around him. His heart raced as the world around him seemed to blur. "Emily, what did you?" John began, but before he could finish, the world around them exploded into chaos. Figures from the group fell to the ground, their bodies convulsing in strange, unnatural ways. The air was filled with a strange light, flickering and glowing with an intensity that seemed to burn through the very fabric of reality. The twins cried out, their faces terrified as they were pulled closer to their mother. "What's happening?" John shouted, unable to process the madness unfolding before him. But Emily's face was calm now, almost serene. "It's starting," she said quietly. "It's finally starting." And for the first time, John realized that the device wasn't just a weapon. It was a signal. A trigger. a warning. And the force behind it was something beyond anything they could control. The world around them felt like it was crumbling. John's senses were overwhelmed, his mind in a whirl. The light that had erupted from Emily's device was still flickering in the air, casting an eerie glow across the clearing. Figures from the group of attackers had collapsed to the ground, twitching in unnatural ways. The ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse with a strange energy, as though the very earth itself was reacting to the power Emily had unleashed. The twins, now clinging to their mother, were terrified. Their wide eyes looked up at her, but their confusion was evident. They had no idea what was happening, no idea that their entire existence had been tied to a much larger, much darker plan. John's heart raced as he watched the chaos unfold. The attackers, who had been so sure of themselves moments ago, were now scrambling, panic taking hold. The man in the trench coat, who had been the leader of this entire operation, was still standing, though his posture was slightly unsteady. His eyes locked onto Emily with a mixture of fury and disbelief. You've triggered it," the man hissed, his voice tight with anger. "You don't know what you've done." Emily didn't flinch. She stood tall, unwavering, her eyes locked on him with a quiet but powerful defiance. "I know exactly what I've done." John's mind was racing. "What did you trigger, Emily? What is this?" Emily didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned to her children, her gaze softening as she reached out to touch their faces. "You're safe now," she whispered. "You've always been safe. I'll protect you, no matter what happens next." "But Mom," the boy asked, his voice trembling, "what's going on? Why are they falling down?" John's chest tightened as he looked at the twins. How could they possibly understand what was happening? How could they know that their very existence was part of a twisted experiment that no child should ever have to be part of? The leader of the attackers was now slowly rising from the ground, his hands shaking as he regained his balance. His eyes never left Emily, and his anger was palpable. "You think you've won, don't you? You think you've stopped this? But you're wrong. The device you activated was only the beginning. You've set things in motion that you can't control." Emily's lips tightened into a firm line. "I'm not trying to control anything. I'm trying to stop you." "Stop us?" The man laughed bitterly. "You can't stop what's already been set in motion, Emily. Your children are the key to everything. They always have been." John stepped forward, his fists clenched. "What do you mean by that? What are you talking about?" The man's gaze shifted to John, his lips curling into a thin smile. "You still don't understand, do you? Your children are not just the result of a twisted experiment. They are the culmination of decades of research. They are the product of a project that has been ongoing for longer than either of you can imagine." John's head spun. This was so much bigger than he could have ever anticipated. He had no idea how deep the hole ran, how far-reaching the conspiracy was. His eyes flicked between Emily and the twins, the pieces of the puzzle slowly starting to fall into place. "Explain it to me," John demanded, his voice raw with emotion. "What are you talking about?" The man in the trench coat stepped forward, his voice dark and laden with bitterness. "You still think you've been living normal lives, don't you? You think your children are just innocent victims in this. But they're not. They were created for a reason. A reason much bigger than any of us." The ground beneath them trembled again, and the faint hum of energy in the air seemed to intensify. Emily's expression remained resolute, but her eyes were filled with something John had never seen before: regret. "The twins," she said, her voice heavy with emotion, "they were part of an experiment. A project designed to manipulate genetics. To enhance human potential, to create beings with abilities far beyond ordinary people. It was supposed to be the next step in human evolution." John's stomach lurched as he processed her words. "Abilities?" he whispered. What abilities? Emily took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she looked down at the twins. I didn't want this life for them. I didn't want them to be part of this project. But the people behind it, they didn't give me a choice. The man in the trench coat stepped closer, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. You were always going to be part of this, Emily. You never had a choice. From the moment they conceived your children, they were part of the plan. John's mind was reeling. The twins, created for a purpose. He couldn't understand how Emily had been involved in something so dark, so twisted. The woman he had loved, the woman who had disappeared 7 years ago, had been a part of something far more sinister than he could have ever imagined. What does that mean? John's voice shook as he asked the question. What are they really? The man laughed again, a cold, mirthless sound. They're not just children. They're weapons. They were genetically engineered to possess abilities, enhance strength, intelligence, and the ability to manipulate energy. They were made to be the perfect agents for a project that could change the world. John's world seemed to tilt on its axis. He looked at Emily, but all he could see was the woman who had been desperately trying to protect the twins from the truth that had now been forced into the open. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why didn't you tell me about them? About what they are? Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. I wanted to protect you, John. I wanted to protect the children. I didn't want to drag you into this world of lies and manipulation. But now, it's too late. They know about us. They've always known. The man in the trench coat stepped forward, his eyes cold. You think you're protecting them, Emily? You think you're doing the right thing? You can't hide them forever. You can't protect them from what they are. You can't protect them from me. At that moment, everything seemed to go still. The world held its breath. The man reached into his coat, pulling out a small device, a remote control. His fingers hovered over it, a twisted smile playing at the corners of his lips. You see, Emily, the man said, his voice dripping with malice, this isn't just about control. It's about power. And your children are the key to that power. Emily stepped forward, her body trembling, but her eyes steely with determination. No, she whispered. You won't have them. Before the man could press the button, a sudden burst of energy surged from the twins. The ground trembled once more, and the air around them crackled with raw, untamed power. John felt his heart racing as the twins' eyes, glowing faintly with an unnatural light, locked onto the man in the trench coat. No, the twins said in unison, their voices calm but filled with an undeniable force. You're not taking us. With a sudden burst of energy, the twins unleashed their power. The shockwave hit the man like a physical force, sending him crashing to the ground. The other figures who had been closing in on them fell back, unable to withstand the force that the children were unleashing. For the first time in what felt like forever, the man in the trench coat seemed truly afraid. His eyes widened in shock and disbelief as the twins stepped forward, their energy building to an unbearable intensity. This ends now, Emily said, her voice filled with finality. John watched, stunned, as the twins, his children, used their abilities to protect themselves, to protect all of them. The power they had been born with, the abilities that had been cultivated within them, had become their weapon, their shield. And just like that, the group of attackers, the organization that had been hunting them for so long, was defeated. The clearing fell silent. Emily, John, and the twins stood in the aftermath, the storm that had consumed them for so long now finally dissipating. There was no more running. No more hiding. John looked at Emily, his heart heavy with a mix of relief and sorrow. It's over, isn't it? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Emily nodded slowly, her face streaked with tears. It's over, she said, her voice full of both sadness and strength. For now. But they'll never stop looking for us. They'll never stop coming. John pulled her close, feeling the weight of everything they had just been through. And as the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, he knew one thing for sure: their fight was far from over.